Europe's bold gamble. 26 nations unite for Ukraine's post-war security. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me. Today, we stand at a pivotal moment in European security, one shaped by a bold commitment that may define the path forward for peace in Eastern Europe. At a recent summit in Paris, French President Emmanuel Macron announced that 26 nations have pledged to provide post-war security guarantees to Ukraine. The plan involves an international reassurance force that could operate on land, at sea, and in the air. These forces are not meant to engage directly in combat during the current conflict. Instead, the focus is on training, logistical support, and future deployments once active fighting comes to an end. This marks the first concrete and collective promise of such scale. It carries both symbolic weight and practical implications. Macron stressed that the guarantees would take effect the day hostilities cease, making it clear that Europe intends to stand behind Ukraine once peace is restored. The coalition is diverse. Some nations, like France and the United Kingdom, have expressed readiness to consider direct troop contributions in a post-war scenario. Others, including Germany, Spain, and Italy, prefer to emphasize training missions, financial backing, and equipment delivery. This mixed approach reflects the different political and security calculations within Europe, but the common denominator is a shared commitment to Ukraine's long-term stability. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has welcomed the initiative, noting that the support would involve significant numbers, potentially thousands of troops once a ceasefire is achieved. For Kyiv, this represents not only practical assistance, but also a psychological reassurance that Ukraine will not be left alone after the war. The announcement, however, has drawn sharp responses from Russia. President Vladimir Putin declared that any Western forces deployed in Ukraine could be considered legitimate targets. His statement underlines the risks and heightened tensions that come with such commitments. Despite these warnings, many European leaders argue that inaction is not an option. The security of the continent, they say, is tied directly to the stability of Ukraine. The initiative has been described as a coalition of the willing, reflecting a growing sense of European responsibility for its own defense and for the security of its neighbors. Another important factor is the role of the United States. European leaders are eager to secure a clear commitment from Washington, especially at a time when U.S. foreign policy may be shifting. Germany, for example, has indicated that while it is prepared to increase funding and training, decisions on troop contributions may depend on how the United States positions itself. In summary, this development is not only about military logistics, it is also about political solidarity, deterrence, and the shaping of Europe's strategic identity. So, what does this mean moving forward? For Ukraine, these pledges provide a sense of future security and the promise of international backing once peace is within reach. For Europe, it signals a maturing defense posture, one that is increasingly independent and willing to act collectively. For the global stage, it represents a test. Can a coalition of democracies maintain unity and resolve in the face of external pressure? This initiative may not end the conflict today, but it sends a clear signal about tomorrow. Whether it becomes a cornerstone of lasting peace or simply a symbolic gesture will depend on how determined and coordinated these 26 nations remain in the months ahead. Thank you for listening.